We're back to the book, but thankfully this is gonna be the end of this book. I don't think I have any other books that we can go through, but we have a lot of things that need to be done. We need to go through those trunks, and I need to start sleeping in this apartment. It gets bright so early that it's not really a problem to sleep up in that cubbyhole anymore, because I'm only up there for a few hours before it gets bright out again, and then I can come back home and get a better sleep. Or at least sleep in my bed, because the creature's gone. But yeah, let's just finish the book so that it's finally done and dusted. And I think it was really helpful when we went through it last time, because we were able to definitively rule out a bunch of these creatures. And in doing so, we ended up kind of learning more about what we've got by being able to rule out what we definitely don't have. So we'll just keep doing that. Let's get back to where we were. So we went from the top to the bottom the first time, and then the second time we went from the bottom halfway up. We didn't finish it because it was just becoming way too long. But we did decide on canceling out some of these, not bothering to go through with reading every single one, because some of them are just, it's obviously not going to be that. Like, for example, over here, we know it's not a jackalope. It's not a antlered rabbit, hare, whatever you want to call it. Some things just don't need to be delved into. It's not a winged horse, it's not a centaur. We know all of these things. So made it through the kelpie, or was it the selkie? We made it through the selkie because the kelpie was like a water horse. We did the ghoul, we did the nymph, we did the incubus, which was kind of like incubus, succubus, male or female. We did the banshee. We canceled out the cyclops because these creatures are massive. And then I guess we were going to get into like the harpy, the sphinx, the phoenix, the goblin, the sea monster, the dragon, the vampire. So when I think about it, looking at the harpy, well, let's just take a look anyways. We don't need to go deep into it, but I doubt it's a harpy. I don't think they fly. They don't have wings. I mean, in the form that they're in right now, they don't have wings. But they are shapeshifters, so 139. Oh, here we are. Okay, we'll start with the title page, I guess. So the harpy, I'm not sure what that says. Oh, there it is down there. It's Gyps fetus, fetus, Gyps fetus, Gyps fetus. I don't know, Gyps or Gyps. Let's just call it a harpy. That's what it is. It's basically a foul vulture known for being repulsive, but it also plays an important role in our ecosystem, just like all vultures, I guess. Small beak size. They're usually covered in the remains of carrion, which adds to their foul stench and their gory appearance. The eyes are forward like a predator's, helping it spot food and scavenge. The tongue is strong and bristled with spines, which help it to shred food. The stomach contains a powerful acid, and it contains a row of sharp teeth which look human-like from afar. So I guess the main thing that we need to figure out is if it's always in this form, or if it starts off in a human form, or something that looks like a human form. Because if it's always in this form, that's not what we have. Let's just go over this quickly. The harpies are notorious defilers and tormentors. Though rarely characterized as evil, the Greek harpy is looked on as a disgusting beast rather than as the fascinating creature that it truly is. So this gives some of the story, talks about the roles that they play in Greek tradition, the role of the harpy, originally a wind spirit, shows how it evolved over time. Okay, let's see. So there's some temptation to connect harpies with other half-bird, half-human creatures, especially those found throughout Southeast Asia. There's also the Russian 𝔼𝕟𝕚𝕚. It's not the same as the harpy. The 𝔼𝕚𝕚 is specifically said to sing beautifully and lure people to forget their pasts and desires. This is far more in line with the siren. To reiterate what I've said before, our creatures, none of the creatures seem to really make sounds. Nothing loud enough to take note of, I guess. I'd be talking all about its sounds if it was making sound, so it definitely doesn't make any sounds, and as far as I know, it doesn't sing. Regarding its appearance, though art renders harpies clearly as having female human faces, the reality is quite different. As with other human-like creatures, sphinxes, goblins, mermaids, etc., we tend to see them as human, not because they're actually a hybridization of multiple species, but because we like to see ourselves. It doesn't hurt that harpies are rather dangerous to approach, so few people have actually seen them closely enough to appreciate their differences. Okay, so there's something right there. Very few people have seen them up close, and they're dangerous to approach. We have people shooting these creatures all over the world. They're being collected and supposedly kept by government officials. People are picking them up, they're gathering them up, they're taking them away. There's no sign so far that what has been occurring all around this planet has been dangerous. I mean, they've, from the sounds of it, bitten people, but it's not something that everyone is encountering, everyone is experiencing. I don't think that they're really dangerous to approach, especially given my example. I was down in that swamp and I picked up mine, and it was basically, it just was dead weight. It didn't try to fight me, it didn't try to bite me or anything like that. So that's one strike again. Well, that's several strikes against the harpy. Let's see what else. So it says that they're not entirely beakless, but their beaks are much smaller than those of the average vulture species. And from afar, their beaks do resemble a human mouth more than a traditional beak. I have to say, because I wrapped my creature up in a blanket, I never got a good look at its face, or its head might be beaked. And it did say that these harpies do have rows of sharp teeth that look like human teeth from far away as well. Their beaks are only ½ an inch long, meaning that the harpies have to get extremely close to their food to eat it. That means that more of their food ends up on their faces and feathers, leading to an unkempt and foul appearance to the human eye. The eyes of the harpy are in front instead of on either side of their head, which indicates a predator role. Although the harpy is in fact a scavenger, its stench drives off potential predators. It's not feeling right, but we'll look a little further. Sexual dimorphism. All major depictions of harpies show females. I haven't heard anything yet still about the gender, if there is one, of any of these creatures. There are male harpies naturally, though they rarely leave the caves and cliffside nests they call home. Harpies are social animals, the females traveling together to find food and nest materials while the males tend to the nests and eggs. This is not right. It says here, true harpies have a human face and a bird body. Yeah, this is not what's happening. These are actual, I mean, they're cryptids, but they're birds. They're birds with weird human faces. Like, human-like faces, I guess. It's pretty cool, but definitely not what's going on here. Okay, so we're gonna cancel out the harpy. I'm comfortable with doing that. It's just not what's happening. We've got the Sphinx, definitely not. We don't have a hybrid of a panther with wings or a lion with a human face. That's not what we've got. There's nothing about what's happening around the world that screams Sphinx. And these things that are popping up, they're even in Egypt. Like, nobody's mistaking them for that. People are mistaking them for people until they realize that they're not. So Sphinx is canceled. I've got the Phoenix. Right, Phoenix. Bird. 100% bird. Definitely not what's happening here, but as much as I'd love to read about the Phoenix and all of the lore and what it does, not just what it represents, but what it actually does, I'm not gonna get distracted. Okay, this might be promising. This is a goblin. This is Hominum impius. The redcap goblin species is usually found dwelling in ruined castles or on sites of past violence. We'll take a quick look because none of the creatures that we found are wearing anything. They're all naked. And I guess we need to figure out how tall these goblins are, because the creatures that we're encountering right now, they're all sizes, but not really, really small or really, really giant. They're sort of within the range of human bodies, standard human bodies, I guess. So yeah, got the recognizable red cap, supposedly dyed in human blood, very interesting. Goblins are humanoid in appearance, possessing exaggerated or distorted features, which can be quite discomforting. Social media has been pretty limited, especially in my country, because they don't want people posting pictures of what they're finding. Large red eyes appear to glow. They've got a 𝔻𝕚𝕚 𝕚𝕚. I'm assuming that's an eye shine. That means that it allows the goblins to see well at night. I don't know anything about the creature's eyes yet. Maybe it's got eye shine? I don't think so though, because when we were in the woods, remember, and we looked in that log, we saw the hand, and I'm assuming because the hand moved, the creature was in there looking directly at us. We didn't see any flash of eyes in there. Not at all. The red caps have a propensity for physical violence, leading researchers to believe that they lack magical ability. That's interesting. I'm pretty confident that these creatures are magical in some way. If they're shapeshifters, that by default requires some sort of special ability, magical, supernatural ability, preternatural ability, something, right? They've got their long claws, they've got their sharp teeth, weapons, thick, long, talon-like fingernails. They're often seen brandishing weapons found in abandoned castles. They're very territorial and should be avoided. Okay, this isn't feeling right, but we'll give it a look just because what's happening here, what we've got, we at least know for a fact that these creatures are humanoid, human-shaped. Let's just go with that. In the genus Hominum, distinct from Homo and the Hominini tribe, are various species of goblins. So this is only one. This doesn't mean that all of them are this, which is why I shouldn't write this off just yet. They're classified as magical creatures that share many common features: an appearance unpleasant to human eyes, a tendency towards mischief, and considerable intelligence. That's some history, the use of the word goblin, the German kobold, or the medieval Latin caballus or gabalus, both derive from the Greek word for rogue and imp. Okay, I'm just gonna turn the light on. Fuck. Okay, we have light. It's not late, it's maybe 6 o'clock. So still have several hours of light left outside before I have to get out of here. So what does define a goblin? This is what we need. This is what we need in every chapter at the very beginning, so I can figure out if what I'm looking for is here or not. But let's see. For one, the goblin is, if we may allow for valued judgments, ugly to human eyes. They're like us, hence we share the Hominini tribe, but also distinct, making them slightly unnerving. Kind of like, what is it called? Uncanny Valley. Close to humans, but not enough human to make you feel comfortable being around them or looking at them. So their off-putting appearance is one defining trait, as is their small stature. That's key. That's what we're looking for. How small? Let's see. Regardless of the species, goblins tend to be no more than 3.5 feet tall, and some can be quite tiny indeed. Okay, well, that's the end of that. The reason why I went so deep into the fairies in that other chapter was because I thought that maybe there might have been human-sized fairies that exist. Because lore revolving around fairies was only ever about them being teeny tiny, but maybe that was wrong. Or at least I thought that maybe it was wrong, but turns out that it was true. So the goblins are 3.5 feet tall, regardless of the variety, regardless of the species. Creatures. The hobgoblin 𝔻𝕚𝕚 has more positive relationship with humans than some other goblin species. It's so cool and I want to totally read all about it, but again, I'm not trying to get distracted. Okay, goblin is a no because they're little creatures. And this one is sea monster. Definitely not. We're looking at tentacles, really long, confusing names, like a 𝔻𝕟𝕧𝕚𝕚𝕚𝕚. Good God. The 𝔻𝕨? The sea monster. Not what we're looking for, but amazing. Amazing. Okay, well, we're actually moving through the final chapters of this book really quickly, which is kind of a relief because the last video was insane. Next one. The dragon. We definitely don't have dragons. Look at that cute little face. Well, different varieties, different species, thought to have evolved from the flying snake, hence its reptilian appearance. Wings are bat-like, containing muscle in a span well over 12 feet. I'm getting distracted. We don't have dragons. Right. Thought that we might have something with the goblin. Let's go back to the front. So, we did the Minotaur, it's not the Minotaur. Vampire, last one. Here we go. Alright. Okay, so let's begin. 𝔻𝕚𝕧𝕚𝕚𝕚. 𝔻𝕚𝕚𝕚. Let's just go with that. This unique blood-drinking species, I don't know anything about that because we haven't seen any evidence of that really. Some of these creatures are biting people, but we don't know why. And not all of the creatures are biting everyone. I never got bitten, so I don't know if they're biting for blood or if they're just biting because they're trying to protect themselves. I think it's probably that. Prefers to keep its identity hidden as a result of the stigma and fear of human reaction. The skin appears paler than a human's owing to lower melanin production from a nocturnal lifestyle, which also makes them sensitive to sunlight. So let's think about that. Our creature, what did the hands look like, or the hand look like? It was kind of like a beige color. Not ghostly, not pink, but not brown, but lighter, like a light beige or something. So there's that. The vampires, they're sensitive to sunlight. So we definitely know that these creatures are sensitive to light because they disappear as soon as it gets bright out. But they don't disappear completely, they just go into hiding, which is interesting. It prefers to keep its identity hidden. We don't really know anything about the identity of these creatures because they haven't spoken, or at least mine hasn't yet. And they all suddenly emerged at the same time. So it's not like they're trying to hide. They just emerged in the dark. Let's carry on. Fangs are designed to puncture skin without tearing. I haven't heard from the info that I've been able to gather that people are getting ripped to shreds by these creatures. They're getting bitten, but I mean, maybe it's like a dog bite. You know, well, I guess dog bites can tear skin. You know, it's funny. Several months back, before the emergence of all of these things, I was in the park and I was feeding this little chipmunk, and, you know, it attracted birds and blue jays and chickadees and all kinds of other really beautiful little forest creatures. And then this big fat squirrel, this huge gray squirrel, rolled up, and it was trying to push the chipmunk away, like move in on its space, and I didn't like that. And it just kept moving closer and closer, and I kept making these sounds to try and scare it away. And it just was completely bothered by me trying to freak it out. But the chipmunk eventually ran off. It kind of ran down the stump and hid, but was still staring at me because it still wanted snacks. And I don't know what came over me, but I just got a little aggravated, and I went to just sort of move the gray squirrel away, not shove it, not hit it, but I just went like this with my hand because it was that close to my hand because I was just frustrated. And when I did that, it whipped around and it sunk its teeth right into me, right into this finger. And it was deep. The bite was so fast that my brain almost didn't register it. It was really painful, but it was really fast. And as soon as it bit me, it was over, and then it was gone. It just ran off. I bled for so long. I had to press my thumb against my finger, my index finger, and I walked all the way home. And by the time I got home, even after applying hard pressure to my finger for almost 30 minutes as I walked back, by the time I got home and I pulled my thumb off, it just kept pouring. So I wrapped it up really, really, really tight with like 5 Band-Aids, and then I went to the clinic the next day to get a shot, or a couple of shots, just to make sure that I didn't contract anything from the squirrel. And I'm fine. Like, everything was fine. It was just weird. It's just a totally semi-related tangent that I just went on. Anyways, back to the fangs. So for vampires, their fangs are designed to puncture without tearing. Kind of like the squirrel. Punctured. It sunk its teeth into my finger really, really deep, but by the time I got the blood to stop pouring, and I looked at the puncture hole, there was like nothing there almost. Couldn't even see it really. So like that, I guess. The saliva contains a numbing agent for the pain and anticoagulants to prevent clotting during feeding. That's really interesting. So that's why, according to all the vampire lore that I know about, vampires can sort of feed on a person until they die, drain them, because their blood doesn't ever clot. They've got a numbing agent in their saliva for the pain, so that the person maybe doesn't even feel that they're getting bitten. They're not even aware of being bitten. That's really interesting. Of course, I don't know how it relates to these creatures that we have. We can't talk to any of the people that have been bitten because they freak out and call the ambulance, and then they're just taken away to that quarantine facility. Maybe there's more than one quarantine facility by now. So I don't know what the outcome is of these people having been chomped on. So the vampires, they've got a keen sense of smell that allows them to find food at night, but also causes them to be averse to garlic. That's weird. You know, it's funny, I always thought that that was kind of like a silly bit of lore revolving around vampires, and it doesn't strike me as real that they would care about garlic. Why would they be averse to garlic? Well, getting back to the first part, the keen sense of smell allowing them to find food at night. If we think about that, the creatures must be active at night. They're gone during the day because it's daylight and they're hiding, so they must be active at night, and they must be eating something, right? And then there's the question of the dead animals that I see really, really early in the morning when I leave to exercise, although it's kind of bright now, so it's not as dark. It seems like the earlier the sun is up and the brighter it gets, and the earlier I head outside to exercise, the animals that I saw before when it was still dark in the mornings, they're gone. So that must mean that the parks people, the maintenance people, and the city maintenance people are getting up really, really early to collect all of those dead animals, if those animals are still a thing. But again, like I've said before in the other videos, we don't know what those animals died from. We don't know if they're contracting some sort of infection or disease and that's what's killing them, or if it's these creatures that are hunting in the night. And if they're hunting in the night, why aren't they eating the whole animal? You know what I mean? Questions. Lots of unanswered questions, but we have some similarities here, which is something. Vampires require only 1 to 2 cups of blood for their daily nourishment. 1 to 2 cups, I mean, that wouldn't kill a person if a vampire fed off of someone and only drained them of 2 cups, or would it? I don't think so. It would probably make them weak, but it wouldn't kill them. So maybe vampires don't actually drain people completely dry of their blood. That's interesting, although I don't see how it relates to these creatures. The stomach of the vampire secretes anticoagulants so that the blood can be processed and absorbed quickly into them. So they don't really need to take as much time as a human. I wonder if they eat anything else. Let's keep looking. This is the last chapter, so we might as well dig into it because it's promising. Few creatures have captured the human imagination as much as vampires. They're actually an entirely separate species from humans. And they're not afflicted with a virus that can be spread through bites, as some stories claim. But rather they're a unique species sustained by feeding on blood. So let's think about that. It's not like they're zombies or something, like they're infected and they infect others with bites. They're just a unique species that lives on this planet along with everyone else, everything else, and they just require a different kind of food source, which is blood, like mosquitoes. Okay, makes sense. So it says here that they're not inherently dangerous to humans. In fact, entire hives. Is that what a cluster of vampires is called? A hive? Weird. So it's like they're using an insect-related term. So, in fact, entire hives can be wiped out by humans with relatively little effort. Finding volunteer subjects to discuss their culture and biology is near impossible, owing to fears of humans betraying them or treating them cruelly. So we're going into vampire stories existing throughout antiquity. I don't think I'm really too interested in that. So we've got depictions of Dracula, Nosferatu, and the like have cemented the image of the vampire as being both otherworldly and strangely effeminate. Multiple Southeast Asian and Eastern cultures have similar creatures. To call them Asian vampires or similar would be incredibly reductive. These are cultures with rich histories and folklore, not knockoffs of other countries. So there's the Chinese Jiangxi, a hopping, grave-dwelling undead figure that consumes the living's life source. The Menanangal and the Mandurugu and Aswang of the Philippines, the two former being beautiful women by day and blood-drinking monsters by night, and the latter being a shapeshifter as well as a blood drinker. Okay, so let's think about that for a minute. I don't still know if these creatures are gendered at all. We do know for a fact that they're shapeshifters, and we don't know if they're blood drinkers, but we do know that they bite. We'll move through these. Then they get into discussing the Germanic and Eastern European folklore that fed into the portrayal of figures like Dracula and Nosferatu. I guess we can take a look at this a little bit. Vampires were originally connected to, and are sometimes indistinguishable from, revenants, ghosts, corpses, and similar beings that have returned from beyond the grave to haunt the living. But keep in mind, this is folklore we're reading. Numerous legends of vampire-like beings circulated worldwide under different names, such as the tale of an old woman known for cruelty, returning from the grave and killing hundreds of people in the 16th century, as reported by Rabbi David ben Solomon ibn Abi Zimra. It wasn't until the 18th century, specifically in southeastern Europe, that vampire folklore as we know it really began to solidify. It's not because vampires suddenly appeared at this point, but rather because we began to understand that different kinds of creatures were responsible for different things. But these stories still contain falsities and misattributed characteristics, of course. But it's from this era that we get the common concept of the vampire. From Eastern Europe, there are reports of blood drinking and revived corpses, and that began to spread to other areas of Europe. I think we all know about this kind of history. Vampire panic was not confined to Europe. Less than 200 years ago, throughout the 19th century, stories of vampires influenced the response to an outbreak of tuberculosis, leading to numerous exhumations of graves, to burn bodies and body parts, to prevent the spread. The word vampire probably wasn't used to describe people like Mercy Brown, who was one of many in her family to die of consumption in 1891, but has been retroactively applied to her case. Her father, George Brown, was pressured into exhuming several of the family's graves. Mercy's body exhibited minimal signs of decomposition, leading people to believe that she was undead and draining the life from her remaining family members, including her younger brother, who was experiencing symptoms of tuberculosis at the time. So, in Mercy Brown's case, her heart was burned after she was exhumed, and the ashes were mixed into a drink given to the younger brother, a common folk remedy for those believed to be affected by parasitic entities. Unfortunately, of course, the younger brother died 2 months later, but he was a victim of tuberculosis, not vampirism. There. We fear vampires because we don't understand them, and we don't understand them because our fear makes us kill them, leading them in turn to fear us and be unwilling to share information. We're trapped in a cycle of fear, one that threatens both of our species if we fail to address it. Well, that's what I think. That's what I think about most animals that people are terrified of. That there's real reason to be afraid of all different types of animals if you don't understand them. You have to act accordingly once you understand the creature, but you can't understand the creature if you are in a cycle of killing it instantly out of fear from a lack of understanding. Well, the vampire diet, whereas meat, vegetables, and other substances provide some level of nourishment, their bodies need and crave concentrated nutrients found in blood. So that includes the blood of species beyond humans, though humans do provide a convenient and plentiful source of food for many a vampire. You can't really say, of course, just from reading this, that these creatures maybe are feeding on these animals that are dying around town. But it's a possibility. They're kind of omnivores in the sense that if they need blood to survive, they're not limited to just one type of blood. They'll take all types of blood, right? Ish. So the amount of blood a vampire requires to sustain itself is quite small. 1 to 2 cups per day is all that the average vampire needs. And the average human contains about 24 cups of blood total. Medical intervention to replace lost blood isn't necessary until a person has lost some 15 to 30% of their blood, meaning that a vampire would have to take at minimum 3.5 cups to even render a doctor necessary. Sorry. I'm so itchy lately. It's summer, but I don't have any bites on me, like mosquito bites. Or any other kind of bites. My skin's just itchy. Showered this morning. I haven't been sweating. So itchy. Okay, alright. Gotta stop. If I don't stop, I'll never stop. So they don't need a huge amount of blood, but you'd run into problems if they drank more than 3.5 cups of your blood. Then you would need a doctor. So let's see what's under this picture is that vampires don't need to feed on living creatures and often buy blood from butchers to sustain themselves. Really? Like, what butcher would give them blood, though? I guess they'd probably have to make up an excuse or a lie. Maybe they'd say something like they make blood pudding on a very regular basis. And so they just go in for regular batches of blood. I thought that the blood had to be fresh, so you can just kind of buy it in a jar. I wonder if they just have to drink it right away, or if they can store it in the fridge. How long is blood that's out of a body good for? Oh, so many questions. All right, anyways. So there are just 2 circumstances in which such a thing might happen, where you would lose 15 to 30% of your blood. 1, a vampire is actively aiming to kill, in which case blood drinking is an incredibly inefficient means to get the job done. And 2, by accident, which would roughly be the equivalent of eating an entire day's worth of meals, and also accidentally consuming an entire chocolate gâteau in one sitting. So they could get over-enthusiastic, maybe if they're extra hungry, or if maybe the blood tastes extra good, if that's a thing. But of course, we humans must ask where that blood comes from. Do vampires truly sweep upon us in dark alleys to pierce our necks with their glinting fangs? Of course not. Some vampires might get their blood from strangers, and may do so violently. but the majority turn to animals, butcher shops, where blood can readily be purchased, or willing donors. So they do turn to animals. That's an interesting thing. That would explain why all of these smaller animals are dead, because if they need, 1 to 2 cups per day, that would kill almost any of the animals that we have in our forests. Not the big ones, but squirrels, raccoons, skunks, any of the birds. Yeah, they'd drain them. They wouldn't be able to survive a vampire feeding on them. And then their bodies would be discarded, because vampires just wouldn't eat the whole raw animal. Okay, that's something. Am I making connections that shouldn't be made because they're not real? Because I'm desperate? Maybe. But that's just what we've been doing this whole time anyway, so no reason to get shy about how weird all of this shit is now, right? It's gonna be weird. It's gonna continue to be weird. It's been weird. It is weird. That's a valid connection, I think. We still don't know what those animals are dying from. We don't know why the city maintenance people are collecting them before anybody else. Maybe it's just a panic thing. They don't want anybody to see all of these dead animals and lose their shit, which makes sense. But we've been given no explanation as to why these animals are dying either. So I guess I'm coming to my own conclusion. Possible conclusion. So usually they end up turning to animals, butcher shops, or willing donors. Yes, willing donors. They're people who know of the existence of vampires and are willing to offer them blood, particularly as a romantic partnership. Like, how did those people find the vampires in the first place, though, is the question. Okay, so there's feeding, which typically takes place from the neck, specifically the jugular vein, or the wrist, the ulnar artery, the inner elbow, the median cubital vein, and the inner thigh, the femoral vein. And it can be an erotic experience for the vampire and the donor alike, particularly because of the close proximity involved. The combination of sexual activity with the lightheadedness and the rush of blood loss is particularly enticing to some, making it a beneficial partnership for both individuals. These relationships are also formed on intense bonds of trust, leading to long-lasting and fulfilling relationships for vampires and humans alike. Now we know how vampires attain the blood that they need, but we must ask how they digest it. I don't really think that... How long is this chapter anyways? Oh. It's short. Okay, so we really shouldn't skip anything. So if a human attempts to survive on blood alone, we're gonna get sick and potentially die from iron toxicity. Never heard of that. But vampires are not humans, don't forget. Their digestive system is not like ours. It includes a multi-step process for procuring and digesting food. So human teeth aren't sufficient for the kind of puncturing needed to bite through flesh without also ripping and tearing, causing extensive damage. Vampire teeth are longer, sharper. They pierce the skin in order to access veins without leaving wide wounds. The wound left after a vampire bite is usually no longer than half a centimeter. The saliva. Despite the pleasurable component of blood drinking for both the drinker and the drinkee, there is an element of pain that not all participants enjoy. Because of that, vampire saliva has a slight numbing effect that allows the bite to be nearly painless, and also provides some anticoagulation agents to keep the wound from clotting before the vampire has finished feeding. And the saliva of the vampire dries naturally and allows the wound to scab once the vampire is finished. And finally, digestion. So they appear mostly human on the outside, aside from their fangs, but internally they're very different. They mostly have the same organs as humans, but their bodies are better suited to digest blood than solid food. Their stomach contains an anticoagulant, allowing them to process blood and quickly absorb it. Because this process moves so much faster than digestion in a human, they tend to feed multiple times per day, and in short bursts rather than all at once. Waste is expelled as much as it is in humans, though, and for obvious reasons, vampires produce greater quantities of urine over feces. Allergies? Vampires are often said to be sensitive to the point of allergy to a variety of substances: sunlight, garlic, silver, and holy symbols. These substances are reported to damage or even kill vampires, offering protection to those who are afraid of becoming a thrall or a simple snack to a vampire. There is some truth to the stories. Vampires are indeed sensitive to such things, but it has less to do with unholiness or purification, and more to do with vampires' heightened senses, particularly their sense of smell and taste. Because they are nocturnal, we'll get to the sun shortly, their eyes are not particularly adept at seeing in the dark. Interesting. Their strong sense of smell allows them to find prey and avoid predators. So if they don't see very well in the dark and they use their sense of smell, then maybe that's the reason why when we looked into that log, which was pitch black inside, we didn't see any eye shine. So their sense of smell means a strong odor of garlic, which also permeates the blood of those who consume it, is too much for the average vampire. So it's not that it's really an allergy, it's just too strong of a smell. I can see that wouldn't be everyone's preference, but I tell you, if I was a vampire, it would be mine. Love me some garlic. Garlic isn't poisonous to vampires, nor will it drive them away any more than a particularly bad smell drives away your average human. Right, so they just don't like it, so it can't really protect you. But sunlight is another matter. So it says it won't cause vampires to burst into flame. Their skin is generally paler and more susceptible to sunburn than human skin. They're nocturnal, likely because there's simply too many humans out during the day to compete with. More active at night, their melanin production decreases. There are still variances in skin tone from one creature to the next, but vampires do have a notable pallor in comparison to humans in the same area. So that would mean if there were vampires in, say, Kinshasa, everyone would be black, but the vampire would still be black, but would be more sickly looking, washed out, I guess. Maybe ashy? Unsurprisingly, holy symbols and holy water have no effect on repelling vampires because they're simply creatures like any other and not demonic beings. Right, they're just animals like sharks or bears. They're just out there doing their thing like every other animal that's totally indifferent to religious and holy symbols. There's no reason for vampires at all to be susceptible to religious artifacts of any kind, especially when you consider that vampires come from and participate in a variety of religions. One culture's symbol may carry no meaning at all to them. I'm still itchy. These sensitivities and lack thereof raise an important question for those afraid of vampires. How can they be defeated? Folklore has given vampires powers they simply don't have, and increased our fear of them as a result. Vampires may be killed the same way as any human, though I encourage you to weigh the killing of a vampire with the same gravity as you would the killing of any human. But I'm pretty sure what's happening with the creatures that are emerging, or I guess they've all emerged, maybe some are still emerging. I'm not willing to go out into the dark and find out, but they're shape-shifting. That seems magical, doesn't it? Wait a minute. We didn't read anything about immortality, did we? There's been nothing mentioned about immortality. Not in the folklore. Okay, well, the final section of this chapter is transformation, so this could be important. Another major fear is that the vampire's condition is viral, a corruption of humanity, rather than a unique species of their own. Right, which was discussed at the beginning of the chapter. There's no transferring of vampirism to humans. We are separate species. No vampire bite will change that. Many humans and vampires have procreated, sometimes producing human offspring. offspring. This happens irrespective of the vampire's sex. Male and female vampires are equally likely to produce vampire offspring with a human. However, as with all cross-species procreation, the offspring is sterile. For this reason, it's greatly encouraged that vampire-human couples who wish to become parents seriously consider how this will affect the life of their potential child. Two vampires procreating will always produce a vampire, but two humans procreating never will, obviously. Vampire bites don't create vampires, or there would be an incredible number of vampires running around. More vampires than humans, in fact. Low populations with low rates of reproduction, especially because of infertile crossbred offspring, means vampires represent only a small portion of the world's population. You likely know a few and aren't aware of it, nor is it necessary for you to be. Just as you don't need to know the eating habits of all your neighbors, a vampire's unique diet is none of your business. Some shade. That's it. That's it. That really didn't say much of anything. It didn't talk about whether they were immortal. It didn't talk about if vampires bite humans, why the human wouldn't become infected. It said that there was an anticoagulant in the saliva and numbing, but it didn't say anything about what the fuck happens to a human after you've been bitten by one of these creatures. Like, how's your wound not get infected and you die? Okay, so the last cryptid, mythical beast, creature in this book didn't really definitively tell us much of anything. I think the gnome was actually pretty close. The only difference was how small they are. Because the gnome had let's see. Yeah, the gnome had the teeth, although it did have the eye shine. It did have those weird little claws. Okay, well. It's a long slog, but that's it for the book. Honestly, I think probably the most important thing that I took from this was maybe from the last chapter that we read, which was there's no real need to tear around looking for these creatures, hunting them and killing them. And I mean, this is how I started. This is how it all started, was me finding this thing, wanting to learn about it. Because most importantly, we're not being told anything. And our information social media is being censored. We have access to the internet, but there's just so many wild conspiracy theories that are going on as well. Because most of the people that are talking about these creatures, they don't have one. So it's like playing a game of telephone, where each story that's being told is being adopted and adapted by the next person, and by the time you find the story, it doesn't resemble anything like how it started. That's why we're doing this ourselves, and we actually have a real live specimen to study. This is really the only way anybody should do science. Fuck speculation. This is a hands-on experiment. We can't fear what we don't understand. It's not rational. We have to understand it first, and then maybe after we understand it, it might be totally rational to shit your pants. But we need to understand it first. Alright, anyways, that's the compendium of magical beasts. We did it. And what I've been putting off for months now has to be addressed. We have to crack open those trunks. That's next. Thanks for being with me while I do this, and yeah.